Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
And welcome back to another edition of the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. Day 2 training camp of your Pelicans in Nashville, joined once again by the voice of the Pels, Todd Graffagnini, and Jim Eichenhofer from NewOrleansPelicans.com. We are all wearing red shirts except me. Well, I guess we wouldn't say all. You guys are going with red shirts
today. It's a podcast, Gus. Nobody can see you. It's okay.
I know. I just wanted to make sure I didn't feel like the oddball or anything of that nature.
I guess we forgot to send you the memo this morning to wear red, but that's okay.
That is very true.
We'll make up for it the rest of the training camp.
Going with, Todd, you have Dodger blue. What's Pelican blue? It's like a navy? How would you describe this blue?
Well, the jersey is technically the Icon Edition jersey. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be more of it's a little darker than... it's about a navy blue, I would say, huh?
Definitely. By the way, I'm glad that we're doing this.
It's not royal blue. It's navy blue.
That's what I'm saying. It's different kind of blues. You know what I mean?
I'm glad we're doing this, speaking of colors, too, this week and not next week, because next week you might have to separate Todd and I between his Dodger blue and my Phillies red.
Right, let's not get ahead. Let's not get ahead of the game.
I said maybe. I said maybe.
All right. Well, let's get to stuff, obviously, that people definitely want to hear, and Pels fans want us to, I guess, relay to what we've seen. Yesterday, when we spoke, we got to see the morning practice. There was 2 days on Tuesday and on Wednesday, so it'll be a 2-day today. We did get to go back and see the evening session, so we're going to give you some of the observations we saw that and some of the things that stood out in the morning practice today that's going to be on top here. So let's just start with that second practice yesterday, Todd, and then we'll go with you, Jim. Some of the things that really stood out yesterday in players that you saw.
Well, look, we saw a couple different versions of what you would call scrimmages. There were referees out there, and you saw some 4-on-4, and then at the very end, probably the last 20, 25 minutes, it was full 5-on-5. We talked about DeJounte Murray most of the podcast yesterday, and it was just good to see him out there meshing with his new teammates and in real live action. And you're seeing when it's 5-on-5 and they're going at it, how big of an impact he's really going to have, especially as a point guard. I mean, the ball's going to be in his hands most of the time. And what really jumped out at me just almost immediately was, if you're one of his teammates, you better be ready. You better be ready for a pass anytime, any place, because he, now sometimes it didn't work, but the thing is there were opportunities where a pass was made where you didn't think that it was going to be possible, and it got through, and whoever was on the other end of it wasn't ready for it. So that, to me, was it. But defensively, again, you saw the deflections, you saw a couple steals. I think the main thing that I really noticed, and I would guess y'all would echo this, was watching Brandon Ingram and the emphasis he had on himself to take threes.
How many middies yesterday?
0. I mean, John DeShazer and I say it all the time. I mean, I call Brandon Ingram the prince of the mid-range because most of his attempts are from the mid-range. He did not take one mid-range shot in any moment of last night's practice, and I thought that it was either threes or driving. And I thought that was significant.
And it was funny, before we get to Jim here, I want to play this bite. This is what he said when him and DeJounte Murray spoke after yesterday morning's practice, where he said, I'm pretty good at shooting mid-ranges. Actually says he was pretty great. Listen.
Worked on it, but it's something that I always have. I just don't do it because, the mid-range look good. But, I know it's important. I know it.
Looks real good, huh?
Right, for sure. But I know it's important for our team to succeed. And I'm ready for it.
So, Jim, to Todd's point there, you hear Brandon Ingram talking about it. I know that's what I do, but to not see him doing that and working on threes and looking pretty natural over it, did that stand out to you yesterday?
It definitely did, and it makes you wonder, everyone's role is going to maybe change a little bit with DeJounte in the mix now. It's kind of the league is headed this way, and maybe BI's career is headed this way, regardless of who else is on the floor, that you're going to want to see him shoot more threes and have a bigger portion of his shots come from beyond the arc. So, yeah, that stood out. But to kind of add to what Todd mentioned, to me, watching DeJounte, a lot of the playmaking that he does. I mean, we already knew that he plays more like a point guard than the other main guys on this team, but you see the way that when he drives into the paint, he's looking for guys, and he's always has his head up. He's, trying to set people up for open shots. He's mentioned this a couple times already in the first 2 days of training camp that he's literally said, my job is to make things easier for other guys. And I mean, you see a difference between a guard who goes into the paint or starts the offense with the intention of scoring, and then, okay, well, all of my options to score are cut off, so now I'm going to throw a grenade to somebody and drop off a pass to them and hope they can score. There's a big difference between that and somebody who is more 50-50. We know he can score. He averaged 22 points a game last year, but he also seems to play with the idea of that maybe his first option is going to be to set people up. And when you have the talent around him that he also emphasized yesterday in his post-practice interview, it's a good way to operate because he knows he's got Trey Murphy at the three-point line and CJ. He's got Zion cutting to the basket. I mean, there's lineups that they can put on the court where all five guys are dangerous scorers and people that have averaged double figures in the NBA. So that was really fun to watch, just the way that he approaches the game.
I'm going to play some of that sound here now, specifically what DeJounte Murray had to say about being able to help out some of his friends.
I mean, any point guard in this league would tell you they'll love to be in this position with the talent, around, So for me, I'm here to make all their jobs easier. But also, they're going to push me and want me, to be who I am. But for me, personally, this is a blessing just to have this talent around me, So I'm going to talk to these guys. They could talk to me. We with each other. But I want to make their jobs easier and make sure they don't got to work too hard for baskets.
So, guys, you can hear him, kind of touching on that here as well. I know you mentioned, Trey Murphy. We're going to talk about him here in a quick second. Anything else stand out to you yesterday?
Yeah, there's a couple other things. To me, I feel like a lot of teams across the NBA on media day and the beginning of training camp, you always hear them say, we want to play with more pace. We want to play faster. It's almost a cliche of the beginning of training camp, no matter who it is, even if it's a coach that's known for playing slow his entire career. They come out and say, we're going to try to play faster. But I do think that that's a legitimate emphasis that we're seeing from them, and it's something that they've talked about a lot, whether it's the players or the coaches. There's a lot of reasons why it makes sense to play faster. I mean, when you have the offensive weapons that the Pelicans have that I just touched on, that's big. But also when you have so many mouths to feed, you have so many guys who need shots, you up the pace, you get way more possessions into every game. It makes it easier for everybody to get the touches and the scoring averages and that kind of thing individually. I mean, it's easier for I think everyone to feel like they're contributing at the level that they have been throughout their whole career.
I'm not interrupting you. You can continue,
good.
But think of what Indiana did last year. It's more along those lines. I mean, they were scoring 130, 135 points almost every night. It was really impressive what they did. Now, does that hold up in the postseason? That's a whole different conversation. But that's really what we saw the Indiana Pacers do a year ago.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I'm not sure exactly what the stat was, but it was something like they had 7 guys that averaged double figures. And
that's ridiculous,
right? And you see a team like that has the outside expectations for them were. Maybe they're a play-in team. Maybe they sneak in the playoffs somehow as a 7 or 8 seed. They end up knocking off the Bucks and the Knicks. They get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I think their style of play was a big reason for that. And I'm not trying to make an exact comparison between the Pelicans and the Pacers, but I think
that's the idea.
Yeah, there's shades of maybe what Indiana did last year that you might be able to see. Last thing too, just from early observations from the first couple days, whether it's what we've seen on the court or in some of the interviews, it does seem like there's a pretty concerted effort to emphasize rebounding. That they know that there's a distinct possibility that we're going to see a lot of smaller lineups. So I think everybody across the board is, no matter if they're a guard or whoever they are, is saying, like, I need to contribute on the boards. And Trey Murphy Wednesday afternoon talked about how he was kind of joking with CJ McCollum. He's like, CJ had 3 offensive rebounds today during the practice or the work that they were doing. So you can tell that they know. Trey also mentioned, we're probably not going to be one of the tallest teams in the league, and if they go with small lineups, that's going to be even more obvious from what you see on the floor. But they have a lot of athleticism, they have a lot of versatility, and guys that can play way bigger than they are. Herb Jones is a good example of somebody who, he has games where he plays like he's 6'9", 6'10", even though you think of him as more of a wing. So I think rebounding is something that they know. If they can combine continued effectiveness on the boards and even improving from how they rebounded last year with the defense that they finished 6th, I think they know the offense is going to be dangerous, and that's going to make for a really good team.
2 things, Gus, and I know we saw a specific period in practice, dedicated specifically to boxing out and rebounding the ball. And I thought that was very interesting to see. And now you think about also who's going to rebound the ball, and that's why I think Zion Williamson has to make a much more concerted effort to crash the boards. Number one, because you need him to, but 2, and this is also with DeJounte Murray. If they rebound the ball, they can start the break, and you don't need an outlet pass. You can just go. So it's just really going to be something we're going to watch the entire season.
And I think defensive rebounding is more of from my perspective, my opinion, is more of a concern than offensive rebounding. And I mean, Zion is actually a good example of this. He's a great offensive rebounder. Correct. He's got an amazing second jump. He probably has one of the best second jumps we've ever seen from any player in the NBA. But the defensive end is more about, some of it is fundamentals of making sure that you're boxing guys out, and there's more effort in there. I mean, when you're on the defensive boards, you're not going to grab it and put it back up. The way that offensively you're kind of motivated a little bit more because you can get putbacks and score that way. So I think defensive rebounding is going to be kind of a gang thing. Like, everybody on the floor is going to have to contribute to that, and that's how they're going to be effective.
And you talk about getting stops, Gus. You don't get a stop because somebody misses a shot. You get a stop when they miss a shot and you rebound the ball and go back the other way. Just because they're missing shots doesn't necessarily mean that the team that shot the ball in the first place is going to leave that side of the floor without points. You got to go get it, or you're losing another offensive possession, and you're giving them points as well by not rebounding the ball.
And so much rebounding, guys, is effort, energy, a concerted effort. And you brought up some of the drills that we've seen. They are being very specific with parts of the court to crash the boards. We saw a drill today. There's 2 people trying to get the ball. One blocks out the opposing player. The other guy, the free guy, goes and gets the rebound. You talked about getting out after the break in transition. Zion being one of those guys right there. It gets it out of his hands. I do want to, before we forget, because you brought something up with Trey Murphy and his size and what he mentioned Wednesday afternoon. Here's what he had to say specifically about a weight.
215 right now, so might as well.
Oh, he's throwing his weight out there to the public.
I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good weight, but no, it's super important. I mean, shoot, we got guys like CJ getting 3 offensive rebounds in practice, so that's huge. We got to get rebounds from everybody. Got to get contributions from everybody because we aren't the tallest team, so we just got to make sure we are the more physical team in, the way that we can.
So 215, Todd. He says he purposely got bigger because he expects to be more on the rebounding side.
He's got to get in the trees, man. I mean, that's the way it is. It is all hands on deck on the rebounding side of the thing. You don't have Jonas Valanciunas in there to get the 10 to 12 boards a night. So everybody's got to put in a shift, and I think that is going to be really the most intriguing thing, especially early in the season. Even the preseason games, but the first 10, 15, 20 games, how it's going to work on that side.
And here's Herb Jones talking about specifically what Jim touched on guys like him being able to contribute and help with the rebounding total.
Yeah, I mean, if we rebound, we'll be fine. But I mean, I really don't care what people are saying about it.
To that point, I mean, how important is just collectively, everybody playing a part in the rebounding stuff, especially when you guys don't have a traditional center on the floor?
Yeah, it's just take discipline to box out every possession, and I think we'll do a good job of holding guys accountable doing that.
And Jim, that's her responding to a question that I think a lot of people are going to be asking to start the season too. Hey, when you don't have that traditional center or things of that nature, you guys going to be able to do that? Are they making too big of a deal of it? Are we making too big of a deal? Do you think you guys can do that? He seems confident to it. Trey Murphy seems confident can get rebounds. I don't get the sense from the team that they don't feel that they're going to be able to rebound the ball.
Yeah, and I was kind of laughing when I thought about that question, because if you ever ask Herb a question that has anything to do with people are saying this or the media is talking about this, I know what he's going to say every single time. He's always going to be like, I really don't pay attention to that. And with a lot of guys, you say, yeah, sure, you're not paying attention. With him, I believe it every time.
He's really not paying attention to it because he's probably either in the gym or watching or playing video games.
Right.
But, it's funny. We were talking about everybody else, but we're not talking about, Daniel Tyson, Carlo Makovich, and Yves Missi. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, those guys are going to be able to get it done, too. And, I talking about Missi, I mean, we saw a play last night, and I know you watched him in Summer League, Gus, up close and personal, but, I mean, he had a putback dunk where, I mean, his head was at the top of the box. I didn't know he had ups like that. So, I mean, that, again, even though he's raw, he's got the ability to do it. It's just he's got to get more playing time and just live action.
It was up there. It was an impressive play.
That's actually head coach Willie Green after practice today when I asked him what was his head above the backboard there. What'd you think of that play?
Yeah, I mean, he's got phenomenal physical tools. The guy is just so gifted. It's a matter of, Todd uses the word raw. I mean, I think that's a good way to put it, where he hasn't played basketball that long. But, I mean, you can see if you can mold some of the stuff that he does. I like his shooting stroke, too. Like, I didn't realize until you watch him practice his threes. I definitely don't think he's going to be doing that in the game. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. But I think maybe he can build out to that over a span of time. We see that with a lot of bigs that come into the league that, if you have a decent shooting form, that maybe eventually, Derek Lively is a good example of that with the Mavericks, didn't take that many threes last year, but might expand in that a little bit. But I think the other three, I mean, really the centers, the four guys that we listed, I think all of them can rebound. I liked what Trey Jemison did rebounding-wise last year with Memphis when he actually got to play in real games for a team that had a bunch of guys sidelined by injuries. Carlo Makovich is a good rebounder. Tice has been Tice is more of like a position rebounder. He's going to box people out. He's not going to jump over you and grab a rebound that way. But, I mean, from what we've seen from Missi, maybe he will be that kind of player where you better make sure you box him out, because if you don't, he's going to leap over you and throw down a dunk.
You brought up bigs and you brought up Tice. It's something that no doubt people listening have been wanting to see or want to know. Hey, who are the bigs on that? So let's just kind of give it a little love here, because you and I were talking during some of the practices. The word basketball player comes to my mind when I look at Tice. Just kind of knows where he's going, just solid. You can tell he's a vet there. I think that experience in the Olympics, he talked about it helped. He played really well, for the national team that he was on. And are you surprised by the stroke? Because he's shooting threes like everybody else, and I'm not calling him a three-point shooter in this team, but he's got a nice stroke.
He's going to have the ability to do it. And
the other thing, too, driving down the baseline, some of the players have talked about. That's something that Jonas didn't do, and it's going to help space the floor.
You read my mind, Gus, because we saw a play last night when during the scrimmage when Zion drove into the paint and Tice was on the right baseline and cut to the basket, and Zion fed him a beautiful bounce pass. He caught it and he dunked it, and that is something that Jonas would not have done. Jonas would have been out on the corner waiting and maybe take a three. So just a subtle difference right there. I just think Tice has so much NBA experience and international experience. I mean, he helped lead his team to the semis in the Olympics this year, so he knows how to play the game. Is he the same type of player as Valanciunas was? No, but those differences can be helpful to the Pelicans, where maybe some of the offensive deficiencies that Valanciunas might have had, Tice could pick up the slack in that department.
My impression of Tice has always been he's a guy who knows exactly what his role is and what he's supposed to be out there on the court to do. He doesn't try to do too much. He doesn't make mistakes. He's not one of those guys where you watch 10 minutes go by and you're like, man, he messed up this play. He hurt us this way. He was out of control on certain offensive set. I remember he was on the finals team for Boston
I was
in 2022.
He's been on winning teams.
And I think that role that he played for them is probably pretty similar to what he can do here. I mean, if you think about the Celtics, the offensive talent that they have with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and some of the other players that they had when he was there, got all the way to the NBA Finals, lost to Golden State that year. But he's done this, like you said, he's done this before. He did it with Germany for the Olympic team as well. He's got a bunch of scorers around him.
Mm-hmm.
I just like the fact that he seems to have such great understanding of what his role is, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's been in the league as long as he has, and he's still here now now that he's in his 30s.
No, it's interesting because he went from Boston to Indiana and basically collected dust in Indiana. I mean, he was doing nothing. And the Clippers signed him, and he was a real contributor to that team a year ago. I mean, we forget how the Clippers really collapsed down the stretch, but they were, at one point, easily the hottest team in the NBA, and Tice was a part of that.
Yeah, just, again, a solid vet player that's going to come in and contribute, know their roles, and that's kind of a theme through a day and a half that we keep hearing these players here, who are their roles and what they're going to be. And I think it's interesting because maybe selfishly, and I don't know how many minutes or all that stuff, but what do I like to see?
Dunks.
Yes. You know who's not afraid to do that at all? Trey Jemison.
That's a man-child right there, man.
It's just so much fun to watch at practice. If there's a chance, he is going to, rattle the rim at Belmont.
I feel
today.
for the practice goals at the Belmont facility. I really do.
He had one today, and that thing was just, and I just love seeing that because it just can add so much to it. Some of the other things, I guess, guys, that were observations you brought up. BI last night, the three-point shooting, that stroke looks pretty good. I mean, it's not only just a concerted effort, but we kind of talk about it and joke about it, Jim, all the time on the podcast, the in the lab videos and everything. Clearly, Brandon Ingram's been practicing on that. And it's just a matter of him wanting to go out there and do it. But through, 3 practices.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been at least an average three-point shooter. I do wonder if with the addition of DeJounte Murray, maybe not only can he take more threes, but the quality of the threes that he gets will be better. That it'll be more catch and shoot. I mean, there's very few players in the NBA who shoot better on pull-up shots where you're dribbling into it than they do on catch and shoots. So, I mean, that could be a factor as well. I mean, we saw Ingram have an 8 3-pointer game against Toronto, which to me, that quarter where he made 5 or 6 in a row was one of the most fun moments of the entire season. So we know that he's capable of doing it. It's just maybe partly a matter of just mentally saying, I'm going to emphasize this and I'm going to not take as many, 20-footers. I'm going to make sure I'm right back behind the line and shooting threes.
And, you don't think the mid-range game is going to completely leave his arsenal because he's so good at it. But DeJounte Murray's a mid-range guy too. So, I mean, you don't want both of them taking mid-range shots during this. So if Murray's taking mid-range shots, then Ingram doesn't need to. Ingram can go out on the perimeter, and as you just said, I mean, Murray can drive into the paint, and somebody's going to be open. We've watched it now for 3 practices. The Pelicans are going to get a lot of open three-point looks this season.
This is why Graff and I work so well together. We have very similar mind. I don't know if you like knowing that, Todd, but one of the things
I don't think so, Gus.
I wrote down literally on my practice observations.
And I did not see this.
Was what you just said. If you're listening and you're hearing us say, okay, great, they're going to be shooting threes, but who's going to drive the ball? Who's holding it? Who's dribbling? At this point, Zion, how to get it? Let's start here. They are starting offensive sets, if it's not in transition, with built-in things that will get them three-point looks. The action's going to come in the middle. You see players on the elbows, and it's primarily Zion, B.I., or DeJounte. Let's just say if they're on the court there. Everybody else is in the corner.
Correct.
So, and we've seen them go through drills where specifically Coach Green, Coach Borrego's telling Zion, you're going to have a guy cutting the baseline. You're going to have a 3 waiting for you. If one guy moves this way, then that guy, Brandon Ingram, starts from the left corner to the left wing. That's all they're going. So players specifically, guys, have spots that they're going to going into a play, and it's at least 2 to 3 Pels players that will be behind the arc waiting for a 3-point shot.
And how many times have we seen either last night or even today Zion with the ball on the block and his ability to find somebody even on the other side of the court.
The play is for him to give it to a three-pointer.
Zion's a very underrated passer.
Yeah.
He's just very, very intelligent, and he knows where guys are, and he's got that ability. And I know it's like, well, you're not supposed to throw the ball across, but he can do it.
Right.
But we've seen him down on the block and able to find somebody on the wing, find somebody in the other corner for a wide open look, and it hasn't changed even in these first few workouts.
I want to go big picture here too with
Let's
the
go big
three-point
picture.
shooting for the Pelicans.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure the coaching staff and the front office have all spent a lot of time evaluating this part of it. They were 4th in three-point percentage in the league last year out of 30 teams.
Which how many people even I have screamed this from the mountaintops since the end of last year, even going into the playoffs. The Pelicans shot at a tremendous percentage. How many of those years, Jim, were we, let's hope we make 32% of our threes tonight,
Right.
or 30?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were scratching 40% as a
Right.
team. It's the volume, and I
Right.
know you're going to get to that too, Gus.
That
but
was
go
actually
ahead.
where I
I'm
was
sorry,
going to go
Jim.
with that, with no problem. Is that they're 4th in three-point percentage. So you say, man, we're getting a lot of mileage out of when we take threes, but they were 24th in attempts.
Right.
So if you're the front office or the coaching staff, you got to say we have the ability to. It's not a direct correlation between if we take more threes, we're definitely going to still shoot that same percentage, but nonetheless, that's the theory is that you got to get up more shots if you're shooting at that high of a rate. And also, big picture, they were 11th in offense of efficiency, which is good. But I think with the talent that they have, I think I'll speak for myself. Like, you went into last year saying you thought maybe that'd be a little higher. Maybe you could finish in the top 6, top 8, if not even more than that, with the weapons that they have and the talent that's here. So they were 6th in defense, which was great. But can you bring that offensive part of the equation up to the point where now you have an even better chance to ascend to that higher tier, like I talked about yesterday with the Timberwolves and the Mavericks of what they did. So 3-point shooting, if you can get more of those up, I think it's going to make a lot of the numbers that I just went through look even better.
What's the stat of the day, Gus?
Stat of the day. It's almost like
day?
Jim Eichenhofer was next to us, but he might have maybe an earshot. He was there. Todd and I were observing during one of the drills where they were getting a lot of threes on, and the stat of the day is 40. The number is
because
40.
that's the number that Willie Green said during media day, that's the number that they want to get up as far as 3-point attempts per game.
So we got to thinking, Jim. We got to thinking and grabbed the old cell phone. So here we are looking at it as the cell phone pulls up, and we were just kind of curious. How many games did the Pels actually shoot 40 3-point attempts? Jim, how many do you think?
Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit.
Oh, no.
Only a little bit
Jim.
here because I just looked up that they averaged 32.6 attempts per game. So based on that, I'm going to say 15 times they took 40 attempts in a game.
I said 10.
Okay.
The answer was 11. What do you think the win-loss record of the 11 games that the Pels shot 40 threes or more? What was the wins? What was the losses?
I'm going to go 9-2.
Wow.
I got it.
Guess who said Guess who said 9-2 on the spot?
Huh.
Yes.
So here's what it all boils down to, Gus. When the Pelicans put 40 attempts or more up, they won 9 games out of the 11. Why? Because they were going in. There were only 2 games that they lost. I believe one was 16 out of 40 and another one was 12 out of 40. It was just one of those nights. But when you see them going in on a consistent basis, you want to shoot more of them, and it really is contagious. And again, you have some really good shooters on this team. But the data is, it's concrete, Gus. If the Pels take 43s in a game, they're winning for the most part because you're making them. I mean, now unless you could be the Boston Celtics and you're taking 55 of them and you're bricking them and it doesn't really matter because you're taking so many attempts. You're trying to make it up, but that's not how this team is going to be built. But that is another number that I'm just really curious to see if that is actually going to happen. But Gus, I mean, watching practice today, it is going to be a concerted effort because that final drill that we watched. I mean, it's not just what you would call a conventional three-point shooter. This is everybody being involved, and it is continually being stressed.
Whether you like it or not, and you know, Pops, my dad's the old school. He's like, "Why are we shooting threes?" I'm like, "That's the NBA. Whether we like it, whether or not, that's what it is.
3 beats 2."
It was literally said this afternoon after practice. One of the players was saying, I think it was Herb Jones, it was Trey. They were all saying 3's more than 2. So that's the value. It's going to happen. And I think that's why I wanted to bring that up as we start closing this podcast down, getting ready for the afternoon practice. What we've seen through 3 practices, guys, there will be Pelicans players ready to shoot the 3, waiting to shoot the 3. This team is going to shoot the 3. And if you're one of those fans who are like, why'd you pass up a dunk? We have seen drills where the players drive straight down the lane, under the rim, kick it out to a 3-point shot. So that's what they're going to do. They will be looking for 3-point shots.
Can I say one thing though, in the interest of Gus's health, mental health?
Yes.
Don't pass up a dunk for a 3-point shot.
That's all I'm saying.
It's okay if you drive into the paint and you see a couple defenders in the way, and then you dish it out to somebody who's wide open.
I'm along those lines.
I honestly don't think they're gonna give up dunks if they have the chance for. We do see on fast break sometimes where you see a 3-on-1 and somebody shoots a 3, and I think the traditionalists, including your dad, including me, are like, please don't do that. Please just take a 3-on-1 layup. But yeah, no, it's definitely a much bigger part of the game, and I think part of that simply is because there's so many more guys that can shoot 40% from 3 individually than there was 10, 15 years ago. So it just makes sense if you look at the math, and it's a pretty simple equation that you're going to encourage shooting 3s.
As we close, Todd, final day of 2-a-days, right? I don't think there's any more 2-a-days. This is it. It was my first time seeing that yesterday. You guys said it was going to be a little bit more competitive, and you did see that. And they did it in different sets of games, different jerseys wearing, who could get stops and all. And you saw it. Even one point yesterday where Zion, was getting a breather, and he was kind of talking to himself and talking about some of the plays we're going on. It gets very feisty and competitive, and I like that. You got to see that depth there. What do you expect to see today, the final 2-a-day?
I thought the most interesting observation that we really have not mentioned tonight was the fact that Matt Ryan started working a little more with what you would call the frontline units. And I think that really ties into what literally we were just talking about, because he is just really, really good.
Has he missed in
Nashville? Well, I mean, Trey Murphy made 9 in a row today.
He did.
And did not hit the rim on any of them. I mean, it was very, very impressive. But I think they're going to really start to integrate Matt Ryan into, whoever these first 2.5 rotations are going to be. And look, he was really effective when he played last year. It was just, it was just so unfortunate that when he was really starting to hit his stride and he knew that he was going to play meaningful minutes night after night a year ago, that's when he got hurt. And it was really, we really never saw him again.
And by the way,
for the most part,
he's extremely comfortable in this city because he spent part of his college career playing down the street for Vanderbilt. So, yeah, he's been red hot. But, yeah, I think some of the things to watch for, not just the rest of training camp, but even in the preseason game on Monday, is just some of the different combinations. I think people are going to really pay close attention to some of the 2-man combinations, like how much do we see CJ playing with DeJounte, which was a topic that the media brought up after practice today. Just all these different combinations. There's so many different options for Willie Green to go through. So that's another thing I'm going to keep an eye on, is just how do we how do they make decisions on who plays with who and what combinations make the most sense?
It should be fun. So tomorrow we will give you another update on to what we see this evening, and also tomorrow morning's or afternoon's practice.
Noon practice
just an hour later, but we're getting closer. And then of course we'll start turning our focus come this weekend on the first preseason game, guys, coming up Monday at the Smoothie King Center. A very busy day in New Orleans. Saints and Chiefs at night, Monday Night Football. But before that, 12:30 at the arena, man. It's going to be really awesome to kind of see. I know you were working on it this morning, looking at the Magic roster. You and AD were talking about. They got some players on that team, and that was a team that gave the Pelicans fits last year.
Really tough
I know it's
matchup.
preseason, but even Herb Jones today said he can't wait for that game. You want to get in some action.
Oh, totally. And then, it's interesting because we're playing the Magic the very next game in Orlando, so we're actually playing them twice in a row.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
And that was a young team that had a lot of talent. So.
It was a tough matchup for the Pels last year. It really was.
Yeah. And I think you'll get a good chance, too, that whole size thing, too, because Baquero, that's a big team.
No doubt.
I'm looking forward to Monday. I mean, just to see, some basketballs against another team, but also, how about the fact that the beginning of the radio broadcast season, the game schedule tips off on Monday?
It is here,
I'm looking forward to being part of it.
Less than a week, for sure. All right. As always, thank you, Mr. Jim Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com, and the voice of the Pelicans, Todd Graffagnini. I'm Gus Kattengell. Thank you for tuning us in. We'll be back at it again tomorrow on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.